We were curious about future wildcards for Kenya. We wanted to know what surprises might be in the future.
What do you mean by a wildcard?
These are things that have a large impact but are relatively unexpected. But if they happen, we'll all face the consequences.
More green spaces, higher buildings, multi-level highways. You wouldn't need to leave your house, or if you do, you take public transport. You don't need to own your car, or you cycle. And
they're often outside the realm of statistics and forecasts and extrapolations. So what you need for that is not a computer, but you need to create a group of people. And we had a group of 8 people, Kenyan, foreign, some techies, a cyclist, a poet, and
so a wide range.
A wide range, creative people, outspoken, and got them together to think with us about futures. And we took them on a time travel. We had built a little time machine and took people on a virtual time journey and visited several places of Nairobi and surrounding.
How many years ahead?
We were looking at the year 2035 in the journey, but the year itself didn't really matter so much, as it just had to be a time where things were substantially different from now.
A long way beyond the present.
A long way beyond the present, yes.
Yeah. I think the future stuff is very interesting because it's about the things that are in people's minds, isn't it? It's about what they can imagine about the future and beyond the kind of realities that they have at present. That's the thing that will allow them to get somewhere.
I think I'll be quite healthy, even if I'll be 80, I'll be close to 80, because medicine will have advanced, and culture and how we act. Well, yeah, I'll have done more exercise and stuff like that, so I'll be fairly healthy. But I will be living in an organized space for people of my age. It'll be out of Nairobi, but within a city. I will have access to all kinds of amenities, and I will have, I'll be living a fairly full life.
For me, the important thing is always the plural. The people who do professionally foresight studies often call it futures studies. And the plural is that there's no one distinct future that has yet been decided upon. Yeah. There are many, many different futures that we can possibly imagine. And the wider the range of imagined futures is, the wider is your potential to find one and to work on one that is a positive one. And the wider is your awareness of the possible negative consequences, and you can start mediating them well in advance.
And different people will have different interests in the future, won't they? And that's part of the process.
Absolutely, and I think one of the strengths of good foresight studies is that they help people to think outside of their vested interests and outside of their agendas. Mm. And this is sometimes achieved. People usually have their vested interest is a relatively short-term one, and you can force them into long-term thinking, which will make them drop their predefined interest.
Sectional interest.
And then you get suddenly where they really want to be and what they're really afraid of and what is really driving them. And that's why I'm so excited about these future studies.
It seems you're segregated by class, for sure. You never meet anybody who's not part of your class system. And we're very insular and guarded. And there, more than ever, we think more about security and safety than ever before, even though there's really nothing to guard that much.
And what were the kinds of futures that were talked about in the session?
We looked at a lot of spatial distributions. Thika Highway is one of the more modern routes in one of the first urban highways here in Nairobi, and people imagined that to be a major traffic corridor, and it is developing as such, but they imagined multiple stories with different modes of transports, trains, cars, maybe a park even on top, but also the cutting through different types of areas and the kind of businesses that it would.
And indeed, they were talking about living on top of this multi-story transport.
Living on top of it. We imagined the shifts in airports, that the current local airport would disappear and just be eaten up. It's right next to the national park. The national park being encroached upon, the new airport, the current international airport becoming the local one, and a new one further out.
Yes.
We looked at downtown, where you saw people visiting different kinds of outlets and imagining the revamping of the shops and the revamping of the work style, and the city becoming even less one of a sleepless city, but a safely sleepless city. What I really liked was the mixture of fears and of positive ideas.
Speaking from a designer's point of view, I'd love to be able to use for that 3D printing technology to be available to individuals. So to a designer, for instance, I should be able to print my jewelry made out from any material. If I want it in gold, I can print it in gold, maybe a little more expensively. I can print it in brass, I can print it in horn, I can print it in whatever.
The frustrating thing for me about it was in a way we raised a lot of ideas, but we didn't ask people to, we didn't challenge at any level those ideas in terms of our work.
So every futures process has a divergent phase where you try to map out as many different issues as possible without any critique, without any reflection. You just map out, all this is what I think about.
Yes.
And then after that, you cannot combine that with a convergent phase, because if you're continuously switching between generating ideas and shooting them down, that doesn't really work. So you have a divergent phase, which this workshop was definitely a part of and only a part of. And then the convergent phase is really sorting, prioritizing, understanding, clustering, and coming to much more substantial stories. What we have now is creative sketches, images of the future. And what we would have after a full scenario workshop is founded scenarios that when you read them, you will actually learn something about the present, and about how to make decisions now, and about what to monitor for, what to work with, what is reversible, what is irreversible.
We'll be moving upwards, because we'll have exhausted the space going outwards, and we'll be more conscious of the environment, and we will stop building haphazardly, because space will be at a premium. And I hope that we'll have knocked out the ugly buildings that we're building right now, and we'll be more conscious, eco-friendly, more careful about how we build.
What I found so important is that in a way this kind of futures work has to exist, because there is no imagined future for Africa. There are bits of it. Technology tends to attract a lot of it, but in many ways that's only a part of it, really, isn't it? It's not. It's not a full future.
It's not a very evolved concept. And sticking with the technology, for example, there is no institute that I'm aware of that does technology impact assessment for Africa.
Yes.
Every European country or every Northern American city basically would have such an institute that thinks about that. What was Google Timeline? What will that do with us? What does a new device do with us? What's geolocation? What does nanotechnology do with us?
Yes.
All these things are not thought through of what they will mean in an African context.
The idea of commuting into a city, I never do. You have to actually, you would have to push to make a commute into any city at any point.
But also there is no, until very recently, no genuine discussion of what an African city will look like, what people want from a city, despite the fact that urbanism is proceeding at a huge pace, really, relatively speaking. And I think that is a kind of another missing element.
Our identities will have changed. We no longer will be associating on the basis of tribe, but on the basis of ideas, and our intellectual and character qualities, and therefore it'll be basically a conglomerate of ideas as opposed to a conglomerate of tribes, and we'll have systems that work, hopefully.
I think it's actually a very recent awareness, and it's limited to very few pockets in Africa, that a city is actually something you can shape, and that you can influence how it's going to evolve. Rather than just add little bits and pieces here where there is an opportunity, but that there can be an integrated plan.
And there might be positive things from being in a city rather than a city being full of problems. We must discourage people from going to cities, because actually that will create more problems. I know smaller cities that have had a plan. I mean, Kigali is as always, Rwanda is heading this these kinds of ideas, and I've seen Kigali city vision plans 5 years ago for the first time, and they were very well thought through, and now 5 years later you see that a lot of it has been implemented. We see also in Lagos, for example, you see this kind of vision that we need, and other transport system and other things, and there is light well being people
put
like
in.
The city governor of
the bus rapid transit system that was so difficult to put in Johannesburg was relatively more easily implemented in Lagos. Those kinds of things do change, and here in Nairobi it's really the traffic is becoming such a cost on business that people really have started to plan the city in a different way to make sure that that doesn't get worse.